Okay, I think we're all in. Okay, guys, so welcome everybody to episode 3 of the Alcon Maddox COVID-19 War Plan webinar series. I'm your host, Richard Ritchie. Today I'm joined by Abe Seksek. Say hello, Abe.
Hey guys, how's everybody?
Abe is, as I mentioned in our posts already, Abe is an industry expert when it comes to digital transformation, having led DT projects for a number of organizations. I've actually worked with Abe on some of these projects myself, so I can certainly vouch for his knowledge and experience. Just a bit of housekeeping before we get started, guys. So today it's just going to be myself and Abe who have our mics unmuted. If you do have any questions or insights as we go through the session, please do add them to the chat box, and then I'll read them out as we go through. No need necessarily to save questions at the end. As we go through, just raise a question and I'll read it out for you. If you have an insight, just type in capital I dash and then the insight. Then I'll read that out for you guys as well, just to get an understanding that we're delivering content that's on point for you. Okay, so. Also, I just want to ask your permission as well. I tend to speak a bit fast sometimes, so if I do speak too fast and you can't hear or don't understand, please tell me. Message me in the chat box, and we can restate things that have been missed or you've not heard. So for those who don't know me already, as I said, my name is Richard Ritchie. I run a company here in Dubai called Alcon Maddox. It is a executive search and recruitment business. Very niche. We only focus on the tech industry. So specifically, I'm talking about IT and services, computer software, and internet businesses. Within that, we only actually could focus on senior commercial roles. So an example would be director of sales, commercial director, channel manager, managing director, for example. I've actually spent the last 25 years running and building sales teams. So that's really the kind of experience that I bring to the table. Now that said, this session, as all the other sessions, they're not about me, and they're certainly not about recruitment. They're actually about you, more specifically, business leaders within the tech industry, and many of whom are already clients of mine. Now, over the past few weeks, I've been speaking to a number of you in the run-up to these sessions, just to really understand, given the strange situation we're in at the moment, just trying to understand, okay, what are the top of mind fears, challenges and dangers that are being faced by executives in the tech arena, many of which have been articulated to me. A few I'll reiterate. So managing a team remotely, we covered a session a couple of weeks ago. Cybersecurity, the increased threat to which, born out of having staff that are now working from home. We covered this in the session last week. Digital transformation, getting it kicked off, we're covering today. Other sessions that we have coming up in the next few weeks will be crisis management, business continuity planning, and then managing partner ecosystem. Some of the sessions we already have locked in with other industry experts. At the end of these sessions, we're going to be collating these insights and creating a white paper that we'll be sharing with my client base. But if we haven't had this conversation already and you would like a copy of that, then please stay to the end. Put a comment in the chat box, and I can ensure that we deliver that to you once the series is over. So this week, as I said, the topic today is kickstarting digital transformation. As always, you're going to leave the session with 3 takeaways, because it's so important that you get actionable insights from these sessions. So we're going to be discussing the 3 insights will help you to really deal with this challenge head on. So you'll get strategy towards mindset, process, and collaboration. So with that, I'd like to hand over to the expert in the room. Abe, do you want to take it over?
Yes, thank you, Richard. Can you guys hear me properly? Okay, so as Richard, we've worked together on a couple of projects before, but let me just tell you briefly about myself. I am a serial entrepreneur. I've had a couple of tech companies, and I've had a couple of tech acquisitions as well. I've been an entrepreneur for almost 20 years of my life, with a couple of jobs between these tech acquisitions. Right now, I'm currently I'm currently managing Startup Bootcamp / Rainmaking for the whole of MENA and Russia. And what that is we're an accelerator / innovation company that we build innovation centers. Plus, we run acceleration programs for mostly technical startups and technically also accelerated startups in beginning hyper growth. We do a lot of niche and a lot of verticalized startups. So we just don't do any vanilla technology companies. What we do is like we take a couple of pillars or we take a couple of verticals and we address them. Like in Dubai, currently we have two programs. We have a Dubai FinTech program and we have a Dubai Smart City program where we talk about how to make, obviously in the FinTech, we deal with financial institutions and with the Smart City, we deal with how to make the city run faster, smoother, happier. We also have other projects globally. In Russia, we have a cybersecurity and the retail programs. In Qatar, we have a sports tech program being powered by a lot of sports clubs and actually FIFA driven, and so on. And globally, we do run a lot of programs that are very verticalized, depending on the strengths of the country. In saying that as well, so digital transformation is something I stumbled upon years and years ago in my second startup, where I had to build strategies for our customers, how to really digitize. It started with support. The company we started was called Crystal Call, now called Crystal. And we had to get obviously offline customer service and support into online digital. And then that range expanded to the actual full digital transformation of some of these clients.
Just out of interest, Dave, was this when you embarked upon these projects? Was it referred to as digital transformation at the time, or was it just looking back? You see, actually, this was digital transformation because to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, this phrase has only really become mainstream over the last few years. Yeah, although actually the process of what people have been doing have obviously been around for quite a while.
Yeah, well, it depends on who you spoke to. Like a lot of people saying. Like, honestly, some people said this is a full digital transformation, while other people saying, no, this is the evolution of the business. Some people saying we're updating our systems. It depended on really, so we stumbled upon, depending on the level of customer and depending on the type of customer, like banks called it digital transformation because they were physically changing from like face-to-face. At that time, when we were doing customer service, face-to-face, visiting the branch to, calling a call center or reaching out over chat or SMS or email. So all of that omni-channel experience was a part of their digital transformation. And then obviously we got into their core banking systems and and then got into a lot of their other things. And we did this for a couple of verticals and we did it very well. Telecoms, banks, even governments. We got into a couple of government entities and a couple of governments. So there was, the actual process of, which we will be talking deeper right now into. So it was a very eye-opening experience, and seeing how every vertical or every industry, how they did it differently was a very interesting way that how we did that. I know you and I worked at dubizzle once upon a time, and we actually did that for an online company as well, where like technically online companies are very advanced in that, but there's always the updating and always the constant digital transformation of the company.
Yeah. So listen, the reason why this has obviously come up as a required session, should we say, in this series, is that there's an inherent need now for companies to get a better handle on digital transformation. Some companies need to fast track it because they've not even started. Yep. Some companies are already in the midst of transforming their business and their operations in that regard. So let's take this a more, I guess, strategic approach to this. So if the challenge is, okay, we all understand conceptually what digital transformation is. So what is the process by which we're going to tackle this? So from an implementation point of view. So let's take through the three we were discussing yesterday. So mindset, process, and collaboration. So let's start with the mindset. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, see, the three pillars, and some people have more pillars, but honestly, everything falls under these three pillars. And the mindset is the first pillar that everybody needs to start with. And the mindset really is split over two parts: internal and external. Internally with your employees and with the talent, you know what I mean? And externally with the customers that you're serving, and how ready are they? So a lot of times people, when they ask me, okay, so how do we start? And I tell them, okay, so let's talk about your team and let's talk about their readiness or their how ready are they to actually get this plan up and running. Okay, so, and we talked about, there was a couple of tools online that you can use, but there is a survey that everybody usually goes by. And there's a couple of tools, like if you go to cultureamp.com or peakon.com or those, they can provide the platform. Now, the questions you're going to have to create, because, you know, everybody does their business differently, obviously, and how they offer their services. But what you can do is send that out and see how ready people are for change. And, you know, the change management plays a big part in this digital transformation. People need to understand that they need to change. It's not, you know, it's not business as usual. And this is something I say usually in all of my companies, and people who work for me will tell you that is the only change, the only constant is change. So we, you know, we always have to optimize everything like that. And so talking about that, you know, when we're talking to the customer, after a basic plan is done internally, we have to go out and show the customer this is the new, you know, offering or the new product, and is this something you're comfortable with? And, you know, we do a lot of these what we call face-to-face interviews to make sure that, you know, you don't want the customer to be surprised and saying, oh, by the way, this is the new product. You know, you have to manage their expectations and ease your way into what you're offering. And I've seen a lot of consumers and customers, and I meant by consumers are the customers freak out. So that's why, you know, in online we have something like A/B testing, but sometimes not everybody has an online business. So you have to show your customers what the product would look like to get their customers ready for it.
So
and that is
this is before investing in the actual change itself. So
exactly. So, you know, they might not like it, so you might have a slower transition plan than an actual. You know, some people like to do the Band-Aid approach, where they just, you know, they rip the Band-Aid and this is the new product. You know, some customers cannot handle that, so they do a multi-level or multi-tier approach in offering that service. So that usually addresses the whole customer aspect of the business. And now I'll talk about the internal. Do you have a question?
Yeah.
Okay, so and internally, there has to be somebody that is labeled as the digital transformation leader or the transformation leader. This is obviously, I've seen it work mostly from the top-down approach, but I've also seen a lot of grassroots where people or employees drove this. But it has to be, especially in SMEs, it has to be really driven from the top-down approach, where management needs to come in and say, okay, we need to have a plan for the digital, for transformation, and let's come up with something together. But they have to lead that. But in all in saying that, also there has to be a lead, like an actual person lead, leading this project, because if nobody takes ownership, it's just gonna fade away.
Who would typically bear this responsibility then? Would it be a COO, or would it be someone
Uh,
outside of the business?
Usually, I've seen it in, depending on the size of the company, and depending on the product. The three faces I've always seen usually lead this, other than obviously the MD or the CEO or the owner. Usually I see it being successful with the IT managers, with the marketing and or business development, especially managers, because they would understand the whole value chain of both the tech aspect and the business offering and the business actually. And I've also, in more mature companies, I've seen both product managers and product owners to be to have a good sense in leading this project. So, and this is something that I've seen successful. But also, so in saying that, there needs to be, other than the leader, there needs to be a committee of a couple of people from, or the stakeholders from every department that plays a big part in this. And a proper OKRs or KPIs need to be set in order for everybody to move forward. And this is where I see sometimes smaller companies struggle. You know what I mean? They do not.
They're not used to the idea of an OKR, or?
No, they are, but they don't. They're usually set in their way, and they've been tackling this OKR, the specific set of OKRs that they've set for years, or for sometimes months or years. But now changing or their OKRs becomes a struggle for them, because they wouldn't know what to look for. You know, they don't, you know, so, but again, depending on the business, sometimes say, okay, you know, we're going to take a hit for 10, 15% across this transformation. And then after that, grow accordingly. And this is what happens with management and with the steering committee. You know, obviously, steering this issue of digital transformation is sometimes not very straightforward, and sometimes you have to go back a step to go forward 2 steps, and so it's set there. You know what I mean? So and you also have to measure it to your bottom dollar, and how is it affecting, and how much is it costing? You know, sometimes moving over costs so much money that it's done over years. You know what I mean? Or certain things can be done manually instead of automating. Again, it depends on the company's situation. It depends on what they're trying to automate. Depending what they're trying to digitize.
I guess the point is here is you need to understand. Okay, what is the objective of this transformation, right? Because unless you can understand the value, then there is no need to do it. But I think the reality is we all, I think, accept now that there is value in every organization transforming in a digital sense. The value is obviously just different to each organization, but it's the committee's responsibility to really uncover, okay, what is the value we expect from this? And then that helps determine the investment in money, time, resources, and what have you as well.
100%. And there's something else that I really need to stress on, especially with the mindset, that people forget that they need to be, when they're starting to go digital, essentially, that they need to be data driven anymore. So more and more, I meant. And what that is there's more numbers other than revenue. So you know, I've seen a lot of businesses where they've discovered new features or new products because now they have more data. They can upsell or push or develop something new for their customers. So data plays a big part. And in all fairness, most of the companies that we've done this, we've seen a new department called, you know, data and analytics, or data science team, or you know, or a BI, business intelligence team come up. And you know, this was a pattern that happened usually in online businesses, but now you're seeing a lot of offline businesses or digitizing come up with these people. So So this is a very important trend that data becomes.
Just a couple of questions or insights in the chat box there. So Hans has said the revenue is in your data, right? Which is true. Right?
100%. You know what I mean? But a lot of times people just look at the bottom dollar, and that's what that's what people sometimes look for. But I can tell you that it's very I remember. I'll give you an example. In some of the businesses that I've ran, a lot of times we found out people were logging in for a lot longer and keeping the session logged in. So, people said, okay, let's see what people are doing. So we started sending more offers through them, not advertising, but actually, upgrade now and get this feature for free. And we were able to convert in certain businesses up to 20% more revenue, just because, of a metric that we saw these certain people logged into the system a bit more. So there was a lot of
the data highlighted the opportunity to grow your revenue.
Exactly.
In the ways you wouldn't have known had you not had access to that data.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
There's another question we have as well from Mohammed. So I'll just read this out. So is he transforming the business model and making it as digital ecosystem with platform and leverage on AI and data to create new value to the customer, or just move things to digital process?
Okay, so it's a bit of both. So obviously in the beginning.
Before we go, because I think that's a good segue, I think, into the second set, right, where we talk about processes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just before we move on to and address that question, Mohammed, are there any other questions or insights on the first section of this, which is specifically addressing the mindset from both an internal employee perspective and also external customer serving mindsets? So obviously the need to kind of test readiness before we embark on any transformation. Okay, there's no other questions, so I think we're on point with that so far. So do you want to then address this question? Because this is a nice segue, as I said, into the second pillar, if you like, which is the processes.
Yeah, so again, I don't think a lot of SMEs document a lot of processes. So now with that saying, process becomes a very, very important because, as I said, that it's one of the three pillars, and people need to understand, there's a lot of workflow tools out there online that can help, or project management tools online that can help automate the process. And what I've been seeing a lot of companies, especially when they're trying to digitize their products or transform, is once they implement such products, like a Basecamp or Monday.com or any of those products, then they find a place for automation and AI, or even change their offering to offer it on something on a blockchain. You know what I mean? Like they can start tracking their business better or something like that. So, but in all fairness, you can't go to AI and all these technologies without even doing an audit on your actual on your business, and then from there you can automate what you've audited, and then innovation kicks in on what you need to, I guess, move to an AI or move to another system and stuff like that. So that's usually how the process is adopted.
Talking about the need to perform a process audit to understand, okay, what are we doing at the moment? Why are we doing it? Is it even efficient to be doing it this way? Because until you nail down the process, you don't know how it can be improved. And I've witnessed that myself in a number of different organizations, whereby, especially when you work in young organizations, where they're in this high growth phase and nothing is documented. People are just kind of scaling the business fast, we're growing, nothing's documented. So the one example I can give, when we were working at dubizzle a few years ago, when we first adopted Salesforce as a platform internally, and none of it was, Salesforce represents a massive investment for many companies, and unless you understand the processes, you can spend a lot of money implementing the wrong kind of processes that then need to be kind of rebuilt only a month or two later when you understand that actually what we built is not suitable. So I think the process audit, so from a process audit point of view, are we looking at the entire company, or are we just ring fencing certain sections?
Well, the company audit would be fantastic, but realistically, I've never ever seen it done. You know, unless you're talking about a big Fortune 500 company or a big, you know, because keep in mind these companies, most of the companies we're talking about, even SMEs, even up to 100 employees, they don't have everything documented, and keep in as well that there is a lot of change within these companies. But what I would do is I would actually start with what the first process you want to automate. Back in the day, actually in my first company startup, I created something called the process document. It was a very simple, like 7-8 pager, where every time anybody wanted to start something, they had to fill it out. It filtered a lot of things that people just wanted to do for the sake of doing it. You know, they said, okay, if I'm gonna now sit down and work out and do a workflow on that, that means it's not worth it. So we only documented what we needed to work on, which was usually 90%, because usually most of the work is repeated. And you really want to document stuff that you repeat over and over and over, because this is where the opportunity comes in, where you can reinvent or innovate that process. And that's where digital transformation, so that's where digital transformation comes in.
If it's understanding the processes that are just consistent, that don't change, they're the ones you typically would automate, right?
Yes, exactly. Like, you know, like a sales inquiry, or like a customer inquiry, or even an inquiry to the tech team. You want to add something new, stuff like that. It always follows a certain format. It always follows a certain workflow. So that's why you automate what is heavily used in the beginning. You know, some people do it the other way. They say, okay, let's see how I can try to get rid of my 10% labor work hours of these weird niche processes. And I've never seen that work. I actually saw one work in one company, but it was more of an offline retail company. But usually people tackle the major repetitive, if your employees or take 90% of their time doing a certain process, then that's something that you need to look into. And, you know, digital transformation plays a big part, because in automation and having new tools, which we're going to talk about in the next section, will actually increase productivity tremendously, and it will also increase production. So this is something that is, but in process, I need to also add that not only modification comes in, but also finding new ways how to do certain things. I always see companies struggle with that. Finding new innovative techniques, you know what I mean? Like when we talk about what's the difference between...
Is that because they're too close to the problem, perhaps? They don't see an alternative way of doing things. They don't see a solution, so they're almost they're not restricted, but I guess their mindset is not one where they're thinking innovatively, right? Because as we were discussing yesterday, the process is really where the innovation happens, right?
Yeah, yes, and I think because they're in the box and they're so zoomed in at the project or the problem that they don't zoom out to actually look at the problem from another angle. You know what I mean? And usually most of these innovative new processes come in when you start thinking really outside the box. And I usually hate saying this word, but it is, you need a fresh set of eyes to look at the problem and say, well, yeah, but this company does it differently because they drop A, B, and C. And that's how the conversation gets started. So you have to find new ways to innovate the same product. You know what I mean? Like if everybody's doing it the same way, like an example is, look at Kareem and or Talabat, how they really disrupted the food delivery, while there was a lot of people having their own apps and their own delivery services. And You know, so that's how usually innovation comes in. And then also a big major part in process as well is collaborating with your partners or with your customers, saying, you know, what do you think if we do this or that? You know what I mean? Get them involved with that. And I have to say, for my call center company, Jordan, a lot of times we had to invent the wheel in offering the service was because, you know, the client didn't want a certain way to do the day we do. There was a client that didn't want any emails. It's like, you can send me the report, but I will not accept emails. They were very secure. So we had to build a platform where we would upload the reports and all the communication would be done through that platform. And client was super happy. And we were even able to offer that to other customers, because they wanted security was their main concern. So again, getting the partner to collaborate is also a very big part of this transition of digital transformation.
Would you say is something that's come up again and again? I hear companies talk about they refer to themselves as technology companies, when in actual fact, many of these so-called tech companies are not tech companies, they're tech-enabled companies. Do you think that that's a distinction worth making to help people understand digital transformation?
I think that we've been hearing this a lot, especially, you know, these companies are tech-enabled, you know what I mean? Like, you know, we talked about a couple of examples of like these cloud kitchens that are popping up left, right, and center globally. You know, cooking cannot be a tech process, you know what I mean? So, but now the technology aspects is finding more data or running more data to get the food cooked faster, better, and even getting more data in the storage, you know, how much should we order and stuff like that, and anticipating the number of orders. That's where the tech comes in. And tech, think of it this way, tech-enabled companies are normal companies that are applying digital transformation. You know what I mean? They're, you know, as it gets better and better, you know, maybe one day we'll start printing food. And I know there's a couple of companies out there that are printing pizza, they're printing hamburgers and whatever. So that becomes a full-blown technology product. But I would say tech-enabled companies are usually companies that are adopted some kind of digital transformation or technology transformation into what they will inspire to be in a couple of more years or something.
Yeah. All right, so we've got a question from Klaus. So the question is, do you agree that a digital transformation is a business model and adjustment is needed in a level in the company?
Can you repeat that? It's cutting up.
Yeah, so let me just read that again. So do you agree that a digital transformation is a business model and adjustment is needed in a level in the company?
Yes, yes, I do. It's definitely, the business model has to adapt, obviously on both sides of costing and on the offering as well, because usually on the offering with digital transformation, you usually see more productivity and a better output of a product, but obviously that comes at a cost. So there needs to be a balance, but the business model needs to definitely adapt, because you know, suddenly you have tooling, you know, and some people think tooling, and there is a lot of great tools out there that are affordable, but there's a lot of tools. Sometimes when you automate these tools, the cost becomes much bigger than anticipated. But obviously, everything will come back, will return, obviously in the revenue, but they have to be accounted for in the business model.
Yeah.
I think there's another question we have over chat. I don't know if you saw it to our panel.
Yeah, I see. Oh, hang on a second. This is the
from Bashar, I think.
No, if you can, do you want to read that one out?
Okay, so it says local tech businesses like ours, where they add value, where they add is localized services and face-to-face presence will struggle to compete with against large corporations. With the rise of virtualization, these large corporations have a much easier to access to local businesses. How do we stay relevant as a tech company in a local? Well, Bashar, I know your business pretty well. You are one of our companies in Qatar. So I disagree with your statement, the first statement before even the question. I don't, big businesses, yes, they have the infrastructure because they've invested in the Oracles and the SAPs and Siebels of the world. I think Siebels already Oracle anyway. And not these are great platforms, but local businesses and smaller startups are usually more agile, so they can address the problem much quicker than these bigger companies. And I've seen this happen many times where the local startup usually ends up getting acquired by the big company, which is good news for everybody. But because they can do it much faster because they have the sense of urgency and they have the need to grow their revenues, while bigger companies, obviously they always want to grow their revenues, but they have a constant line that they would that they can live off of. But the survival and how hungry these startups are becomes a much bigger playing fact than actual budgets.
So we've got
yeah, go ahead.
So just one of the insight before we move on to the third section. So so Hans said companies should look at F1, where they're always improving processes, analyzing data to improve and stay ahead. Perfect combination of old, i.e. hardware, and transformation by digital tools and technology. Statement. I think it's a great example, yeah?
Very good example, yes. To add to that, actually, I was watching a documentary on F1 sport. I think they're the most transformed sport on earth because they spend so much money on innovation and tech, and so that's a very good statement. Thanks.
It's actually quite interesting. Slight side topic, but just something that's been in the news recently. I think it was one of the British-based, the UK-based F1 teams repurposed their technology to create some kind of ventilators, whatever, to deal with this. The Mercedes, sorry, my wife corrects me, the Mercedes factory in Bracknell. And yeah, so they repurposed what they're doing in order to create this a new ventilator, I think. Because it just goes to show, like, sometimes we're and I think this would be one of the things that comes out of this crisis, if we're still calling it that. We have such great minds at work in this world, but they're involved in things like sport. And I'm not bashing sport. I love sport. I love F1 specifically. But when there are organizations like this that have money, that have these great minds, and they're able to just innovate so quickly, it's a tragedy to some extent that these guys aren't employed in places where the innovation is needed more readily, if that makes sense. Just a kind of side and an observation of it. Okay, fine. So look, to wrap the second part of the session up then with the processes. So you're saying that the key here is to perform an audit, right?
Yep.
This is the kind of key takeaway. So how would someone perform this audit?
So the audit is usually, okay, again, it's going back to our first point, either internally the digital transformation leader can lead that if they have a bit of experience. But what I've been seeing mostly people do is hire some help from outside on a contractual basis or on a part-time basis, where they come in and say, and I think there's a lot of companies out there that actually do process auditing, and they come in, they give you a document of obviously auditing all the processes that need to be, and then they can make a recommendation what to start with, and then you guys can come up with the actual plan itself on what you need to automate or what you need to transform, or and we'll usually take it from there. But I see a lot of help being done from people outside of.
Yeah, well, I guess there's three ways to do this, right? There's three ways to tackle it. Either you either get a consultant in to lead this, and I guess the consultant can cover the manage the mindset shift as well from a change management perspective. You can employ a new digital transformation expert and create a new role, or you can find an ambassador within the organization and upskill them to become the internal stakeholder. So in order to achieve this. So before we move on to this, the final stage of this session, are there any more questions for this section specifically, or any other insights, guys, before we move on? Just type your comments in the chat box.
Actually, I have a small story as well. Like, I was on a call last week with an Italian company who actually they did water sports, and so they have a lot of oxygen tanks and stuff like that. And they were actually introduced a new product where they were printing ventilators, 3D printing ventilators, and attaching these, because they're attaching these big oxygen tanks to it, and they were helping out hospitals and stuff like that. So this became a technology startup. You know, they were like I think they were like a diving resort or something like, or a school that taught how to dive or something, and now they're really helping this pandemic with. You know, they've already produced something like 200. They've already printed 200 ventilators, and it's very nice to see how people's brains start working immediately and how they can actually get that up and running.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so look, there's no more questions. So I think we're on point with the content, and let's move on to the final section, which is collaboration. So explain a little bit more about what you mean by collaboration and why that's important as part of a digital transformation strategy.
So collaboration really comes in under as well two umbrellas and two sections. One is tooling, because tooling is very important. There's a lot of tools out there to help better streamline your business. And the other pillar is obviously the actual collaboration or the actual conversations that you're having between people and each other, because that is a big part. People play a big part in the digital transformation. And let me talk about some of the toolings here. And with this revolution of SaaS, software as a service, coming up, where you can sign up, and every user you pay X amount of dollars per month. You don't have to worry about storage. You don't have to worry about installing anything. You don't have to worry about security. And actually, yesterday I did tell you I'm going to mention the story. In my last startup, we had an HR payroll software where we were convinced, where the founder, actually the CEO, was convinced that they're secure, they're super secure. And he even kept pointing out, look at my server room, it's right there. There's my server sitting there, I can see it. And while we were pitching, no joke, a person came in with a thumb drive, put it in the server. I don't know what they did, and they came out. And I'm like, so I was telling him, I'm like, okay, so now you can't tell me that you're more secure in the cloud. Yeah. Your information
just happened right in you.
Exactly, environment. So this is, this is another issue. People, say, I don't want other people to have my data. That is a very big misconception. Everybody's going to the cloud. The cloud is, I would say, I would even argue, a lot more secure than 99.9% of the businesses out there. The amount of redundancy and business continuity on these servers, and your data is never going to get corrupted or anything like that. So it's safe. And another big thing is a lot of people do not like adopting cloud computing or putting stuff on the cloud. And that's, especially I've seen it with old tech companies, they want to in-house as much as information as possible. Yes, if it's sensitive data, I totally agree. And if you have your securities up and running, but like other tools, like Slack, like if they don't use Slack because of security, like these tools need to be really adopted by everybody. And these are really collaboration tools, which also addresses the other pillar, which I'm going to talk about in a bit. I've been seeing a lot of chatter on these days on remote work. What can we give access to? What can we not give access to? I was talking to a local telco a week ago who to this day have Zoom blocked in their workplace. They can use their infrastructure, but they still haven't gone around unblocking certain protocols. So I think that is very important to have for everybody, like a remote working strategy or process, especially now. I think in the UAE, we're at almost in the 6 weeks we've been working from home. I think on a proper lockdown, we've been on, this is our 4th week. So remote working is very important. Also mobility working, some people they need to dispatch certain people to certain areas. That needs to be worked out properly. Some people are also afraid to use some IoT devices that can help them streamline their businesses. Like I saw a business in the construction field last week install a device where people would come in and they would log either their attendance or their concerns through this device, which is nowhere near the office, that communicated with the office. So there's a lot of IoT things that you can play around with. A lot of these tools are becoming much friendlier to use, and they're much more mobile and obviously a lot more secure. So tooling becomes a very big part in this transformation. And and there's a million, like if you tell me I want a chat tool, I can tell you about Slack.
But it's surely quite overwhelming as well for companies. Like you said, you touched on the security risk. We actually spoke about security risk last week. We actually spoke about Zoom having a security risk last week that I believe has been overcome now. But it's a minefield. So what kind of approach can a company take when it comes to selecting the tools for collaboration? Because there are so many. How can they pick the right one?
Again, when you do the audit will show you what features in the tools you need. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you want just the chat thing, honestly, I'm seeing companies now surviving on WhatsApp. You know what I mean? But WhatsApp it's good on a peer-to-peer. Like if I want to send you something but when there is groups involved, that's when more collaboration tools like the Slack or Microsoft Teams or all of those come in play. Again, depending on the features and what you're trying to do. You know what I mean? Like Slack is more of a techie tool where you can share even code, while Microsoft Teams really plugs into your backend if you're running an Exchange server or anything like that. So it depends on it comes back from your audited process auditing statements on what you need to go further. And I can tell you, there's a lot of companies that adopt tools, brand new tools, like for the first time. Like, we were talking to a company a week ago, and they're like, "This is the first time I opt into Expensify." All their expenses were usually done over a spreadsheet that was emailed to the finance, and now they've, due to this, they're like, "Okay, let's implement this." There's a lot of companies that emerged, online accounting software like Xero, like even QuickBooks, I think thrived in their last, in 2009 when they went on the cloud. So a lot of these tools, start popping up and more adoption will come in from there. So, but again, it goes back to their needs. What tools and what features in these tools are needed for you to take further.
We have a question, Abe, from Ricardo. do you consider GDPR a menace to digital-driven businesses?
This is a very good question, actually. I know, Ricardo, I know you sit in Portugal, so, and this is an issue that we do have globally. But I don't think it should be that issue, is because sometimes data as data can, without it being labeled as your data, is what people misunderstand. You know what I mean? Like, and if it's, the tricky part is obviously when you're trying to log in to your network to do your own work, the compliance of GR is not there. You know what I mean? Because you're on your network. The problem is when you go home and you're trying to log in and how you're pushing that data. And I think a lot more new companies will pop up to address that specific issue with, when it comes to the cyber or the security issues. As we saw, Zoom patched up their security issue last week, and I know they're still doing more and more of that. But I don't think it will be an issue going forward, because we're going to just push generic data and not your personal data. And I think that would go around all these European and US privacy laws.
So just to kind of sum up from a collaboration point of view, you're saying there's two components to this. One is the tooling, and then the other, perhaps the more important part, is the people, right?
The people, yeah. And I haven't talked about that. So honestly, I don't know about you guys, but since this lockdown happened, I've been spending more time on Zoom than I would do in the office, because then I'm actually, my side conversations now became half an hour talks, either one-on-one or, and I think what happens is with collaboration, and I think the tech sector or the online sector did this very well, where they do something called the stand-up, where everybody, they usually do it daily, where everybody huddles up for like 10 minutes, and everybody talks about what they did yesterday and what they're doing today, so to make sure to keep everybody aligned. But in saying that, collaboration also needs to happen on a multi-tier. So, on a department level, on a supervisor, reporting direct lines level, and on a management level. And I think also tech companies do that anyway, so they're not gonna see that much of a change, but the change will happen in the biggest hit areas like, hospitality and retail and all of that. And more of that will happen. So there needs to be more talking, more people communicating, and that's what the tools come in, if everything is documented, whether 1.0 email or 2.0 Slack and these other tools, this makes sure that the company is on the right path, because the biggest usually killer of any business is communication. People do not talk and do not share information, and when you find people doing double the work is when problems happen.
Yeah, I've experienced that myself from I won't mention the company name at this stage, but just from working within a sales organization, within an organization, or as a sales division, you're on the front line, right? You're interacting with your clients on a daily basis, and the insights you obtain from that interaction need to be fed back in the right manner in order for those insights to be actioned, or at least triaged and actions. But otherwise, sales teams can just appear to be, a moaning department to tech, product, everyone else, which is tragic, really. So to me, it's very, it's the challenge to have processes in place to provide for that easy transfer of information from the customer to the sales team to the product team, which gets onto the roadmap, and then back to marketing to create the messaging, and then back to sales, back to the client, is important. You don't have that loop, you got big problems, and that's why I think. I
think when they see that, and they see that there's you know, because people think, you know, I'm just going to say this and it's going to go into a black hole. But when
Yeah.
they know what the process is and they see that, like the actual concern moved over a tool, that they know that there's things that are moving, you know?
Yeah. And that's good. That's all customers, clients want sometimes. Is not necessarily, I want this change today. It's, I want to believe that what I tell you is being actioned or at least considered, and there's a process that goes along with it, not just, like you said, going into a black hole. So look, let's just round up because we're almost out of time. Guys, last opportunity really to raise any questions before we close, or perhaps put any other insights in the chat box. So you can do that as I'm just recapping. So today's objective was to discuss the idea of fast-tracking digital transformation as a result of this COVID-19 situation, and obviously answer questions around this topic. Specifically, we've gone into the three kind of pillars as Abe's explained. So that's the mindset, how to ensure there's a shift or an acceptance, you know, testing the readiness of this mindset change from both an internally employee perspective and not externally from a customer perspective. Also, second pillar or second strategy, if you like, is to really perform a process audit to understand, okay, if we're going to digitally transform, where is it going to add the most value to our organization? Where do we need to innovate? Where do we need to streamline? Where can we adopt AI to replace certain processes? So we really understand that. And then the third thing is obviously the collaboration part, is making sure that we have the right tools in place to allow for collaboration, but also an appreciation that people are the most important part of digital transformation. So getting their buy-in, having a leader or ambassador, call them what you will, within your organization that really takes the lead on this transformation is critical. Short term, that may be hiring a consultant. Short term, it may be upskilling, or perhaps even a more long-term upskilling an existing person within the organization that can take on this additional responsibility, or recruiting an expert full-time that is in charge of it. So you're not asking someone to wear too many hats, should we say. So look, for me, that's been an incredibly useful session, Abe. For those guys that are still on the call, I've already spoken to quite a few of you already, but for those that I haven't spoken to, just want to obviously make sure that we've covered everything. I had your questions answered. So for those on the call that I haven't spoken to already, if you, I mentioned at the beginning of the call, the purpose of these sessions over the next few weeks is to collate all these insights from industry experts and put together a war plan that we'll then share with my clients and with any other people that want access to the white paper. So if you'd like a copy of that, either put a comment in the chat box now, or you can send me a message on LinkedIn or an email directly. My information is obviously on LinkedIn. You guys have that. There is, yeah, also from I guess if you'd like a one-to-one session on an informal basis over the coming days, if you have questions about, again, more questions around digital transformation, you can do that to me via myself, or if you have questions regarding, okay, what does this mean from a recruitment, from an onboarding perspective? How can I ensure that I'm set up to really transform my business in a digital sense? I'm obviously here to support you in that respect as well. So with that, thank you very much. I will be back again next week. Next week, we'll have an industry expert in to talk about, I forgot, we'll tell you. Hang on, I haven't forgotten. It's reputation management ahead of the bounce back. So it's more to do with, okay, the decisions we make today will affect how we're able to run our businesses post COVID-19. So that's going to be a really important session for you to check into. Abe, thank you also to you. Do you want to say any closing remarks?
No, I just want to thank you for this, and I think it's very informative. I did attend your first two sessions. I thought IT security one was very enlightening. Guys, again, thank you for everybody. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn as well. Thank you very much, Christian, for this, and let's keep on coming.
Great. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a great week. Stay safe. See you soon.
Thank you.